If you've flown JetBlue recently, or you've got a flight booked with them later this year, here's a question that's been quietly circulating in aviation and finance circles for months. Is this airline actually going to make it? Not in some vague, distant sense, we're talking about a real, live conversation happening right now among credit agencies, Wall Street analysts, and even the airline's own founder. And the strange part is, nobody has actually said no. Let's go through exactly what's happening because this isn't speculation, it's a paper trail of real financial moves and it tells a genuinely uncertain story. Start with the founder, David Neilman, the guy who literally started JetBlue back in 1999, said publicly in April that the airline was, in his words, in a real tough spot. He was citing an estimate from a JP Morgan analyst suggesting that if jet fuel stayed expensive, JetBlue could lose over $1 billion this year, enough, he said, to push the airline into bankruptcy. That's not a random critic, that's the founder. A few days later, JetBlue's actual CEO, Joanna Garrity, responded with an internal memo to employees. She called the bankruptcy talk speculation and said directly that filing for bankruptcy in 2026 wasn't something the company was considering. That sounds reassuring, until you notice exactly what she didn't say. She ruled it out for 2026. She said nothing about 2027, and in corporate communication, when an executive is that precise about the time frame, it's usually not an accident. Shortly that memo, a figure started circulating based on JP Morgan underlying analysis, roughly a 75% chance of JetBlue filing for bankruptcy by 2027. That's not a headline someone invented for clicks. It's rooted in an actual bank's credit modeling and it's spread through aviation circles fast. Then there is the credit rating, which is maybe the least emotional and most reliable signal in this whole story. In April, Fitch Ratings downgraded JetBlue's credit rating to triple C. That was the third downgrade from a major ratings agency in 18 months. In plain terms, triple C plus means the company is currently vulnerable and default is a real possibility, not guaranteed, not imminent, but real. That rating also makes borrowing money more expensive, which matters a lot here because JetBlue is currently sitting on around $9 billion in debt after 6 straight years of annual losses. So that's the fear side of the story. But here's where it gets genuinely more interesting because the last few months don't paint a picture of a company quietly giving up. In early August, JetBlue reported its second quarter results, and the picture was mixed in a very specific way. Revenue actually grew by 14.5% year over year, reaching $2.7 billion. That's a real, meaningful growth, not a rounding error. But they still posted a net loss of $247 million for the quarter. Why? Jet fuel. Average fuel prices jumped 76.3% year over year, up to $4.23 a gallon. So JetBlue is actually selling more seats and making more revenue than last year, and still losing money because the cost of literally running the planes went up faster than the revenue did. And then, almost immediately after that earnings report, JetBlue made a move that reads like genuine confidence. They spent $58.5 million buying up landing slots at LaGuardia Airport in New York, slots that used to belong to Spirit Airlines, the carrier that fully collapsed back in May. That deal gives JetBlue up to 12 additional daily round trips starting in 2027 in one of the most constrained, hardest to expand into airports in the entire country. Buying up your dead competitor's most valuable real estate is not typically something a company does if it's planning to fold. The stock jumped 3% on the news. But, and this is the detail that really makes the story worth telling, about a week before that LaGuardia deal became public, JetBlue's own chief financial officer sold roughly $445,000 worth of company stock. That's disclosed publicly through a standards SEC filing, so there is nothing secret or illegal about it. Executives sell shares for all kinds of personal reasons unrelated to company outlook, but the optics are hard to ignore. The person with arguably the clearest internal view of JetBlue's finances sold stock right around the same window that the company was also making a bold expansionary move. Those two signals point in different directions, and that contradiction is honestly the whole story in a miniature. The tension kept going. Just 6 days after the LaGuardia fuel stock jump, JetBlue got hit again. Citi downgraded the stock outright to sell, cutting its price target from $6.60 down to $5.30. Bank of America kept its own underperform rating. Both cited the same core issue. Even with the revenue climbing, elevated jet fuel costs are eating the gains almost as fast as they come in. JetBlue's own response was to quietly trim its fourth quarter flights schedule by about 1% and to tell investors directly that how much cash they will need in the second half of the year depends heavily on where fuel prices go from here. That's a company hedging its own bets in real time, in public. So, where does that leave things? Genuinely unresolved. And I think that's actually the honest answer rather than a cop out. JetBlue is not in bankruptcy. Its executives say they're not planning to file, at least this year, but it's carrying $9 billion in debt, a credit rating that signals real default risk, a CFO who just crashed out a meaningful chunk of stock, and a fuel bill that's completely outside its own control, tied to a volatile geopolitical situation in the Middle East, at the same time as growing revenue, expanding into one of the tightest airport markets in the US, and clearly still fighting for a turnaround rather than accepting decline. Both of these things are true simultaneously, and that's exactly why nobody serious is willing to give you a confident yes or no on this one right now. If you've got a JetBlue flight booked, none of this means panic or start canceling tickets. Airlines this size don't disappear overnight, even when they do eventually restructure, and passengers are typically protected either way. But it's worth understanding why the ground underneath a brand you might fly regularly is shakier than it looks from the passenger seat. So here's what I'm curious about. If you found out an airline you'd already booked with was in this kind of financial territory, would it actually change your travel plans, or does it just not register until it's too late to matter? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns like this as they develop, subscribe, drop your take in the comments, and hit like so more people actually see what's really going on here.